Hello, my great friends. Today begins a new series, and we're going to explore asking the question in our lives, what are things that we spend time on that don't really matter? What matters the least? And why we're going to explore that is this idea of becoming the best version of yourself. It's usually not things that you have to do. It's usually things that you really need to subtract, because you were born pretty darn perfect. So today's video is going to explore something that's very prevalent right now with all of the social media. And let me be clear, I am not saying social media is bad. It can be a great vehicle for connection and doing things, but it's also pretty obviously, it's very unhealthy. We live in a day and age where there's lots and lots of pretending. And sometimes there is pretending on steroids. And I tell all of my coaching clients, all of my clients that I speak to, all of my businesses that I speak to, you don't need to fake it. You're awesome. Just go out and lead a life that there doesn't need to be any pretend. And I want you to remember this thought. A journey towards something is always a journey away from something else. And what I want to talk about today is journeying away from things that are fake. And I've got one of my favorite all-time stories, because these things usually start when we're kids. We start faking and pretending. And shortly after I was my little self and I was getting beat up every day, and I had gotten shoved into the porta potty and had it tipped over and then got beaten up afterwards, when I got back home, I got cleaned off and had lied to my parents, as I said, for the first time. It turns out my parents wanted to go see a James Bond movie. Now, I never knew who James Bond was. This was my first experience at a James Bond movie, and as I sat there in the theater with my mom and dad, my brother and my sister, I was watching Bond, take out the bad guys. And I thought, I don't need to be John Dunn anymore. I need to be James Bond. If I can become James Bond, it solves all of my problems. Well, as fate would have it, the same weekend, my mom took me to the TG&Y. And right by the register, there was this little plastic, I think it was a company called Janko watch. This little plastic watch, it had a little hole in the side, and you could put these little red missiles in it. And then you could hit the button and your watch would shoot out missiles like you were a young James Bond. And I thought, this is my James Bond training watch. So, of course, I got my mom to purchase it for me. And I went home and I started practicing. And since I didn't want to go outside and get beat up, I had no one to practice on besides my mother. So I'd hide behind the bookcase and I'd jump out like a secret agent and I'd shoot her with my red missile and she'd jump and say, "Son, you can't do that. You're going to give me a heart attack." And this went on for a few weeks. And then it turns out, this was unbeknownst to me at the time, my mom and dad were conspiring behind my back. My mom had communicated to my dad, "Your son keeps jumping out and scaring me. And he's practicing his James Bond skills, but he's going to give me a heart attack, and he thinks I'm joking. But I'm not. This has got to stop, Russell." So every night I was in my bed, and I'd have my James Bond watch on, and I'd be sleeping with it. And my dad would come in there to, kiss me on the forehead and say, "Good night, son." But every single night, he'd try to get that watch away from me. And I'd say, no, Dad, you can't have my watch. You can't have my watch. One day we were at this store called Luria's, and I went over to the watch counter and I had picked out this really cool digital watch that I liked. That was LCD was a big deal back in the late 70s, early 80s. And one night my dad came into my room and he sat down. I could tell he was going to be there a little bit longer this time. And he says, "Son, I really want you to give me that watch." I said, "No, Dad, you can't have my watch." And I wasn't telling him why I was practicing. I wasn't telling him I was getting beat up every day. He didn't find that out it was about 30 years, really broke his heart. But I didn't ever tell him why I was practicing. But this night he said, "Son," and he had a firmness to his voice. He said, "I want that watch. I need it. You're gonna kill your mother." And I love my mom. To this day, more than just about anything in the whole wide world. And I gave him the plastic watch. And something magical happened. He had me close my eyes, and he slipped something real heavy on my wrist. This is the watch that my dad gave me back then. He said, open your eyes, and there was that LCD watch from Bluria's sitting on my hand. My parents must have thought I was a lot smarter than I was, because he told me a message that went way, way, way over my head. He said, son, you've got to let go of the fake to make room for the real. He said, son, you've got to let go of the fake to make room for the real. Right over my head that day. I love my new LCD watch. That's kind of, I started to like the shiny objects back then. But many, many, many years later, I reflected back on that moment and realized what great advice it was. We all have 24 hours. We all have 7 days. We all have 52 weeks per year. And the more fake we have in our lives, it doesn't allow space for the real. So when you tune off of this video today, I want you to just think about that statement. You've got to get rid of the fake to let in room for the real. You've got to get rid of the fake so that you have room for the real. And it's not for me to tell you what's fake. That's for you to figure out. But I can tell you, if you're willing to subtract the fake, something that matters very little, the real that will come into your life will blow your mind. Let go of the fake.
You know it's real? Love is real. We love and appreciate each and every one of you. Please hit like, subscribe, and share.